Um, okay, so Eric, the floor is yours. If you'd like me to pull up any of your paperwork, I can do that. If not, you can share your screen.
Great. Yes, I have a presentation about 12 minutes or so long. So if you can bear with me through that, and then happy to answer any questions that you have. So let's see if I can manage to do this correctly. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to present. As Jaime said, I am the founder and principal of BLDGWORKS, and I've gotten to know Jaime and some of the other players in Ossining over the last couple of months and preceding this meeting, and so I'm pleased to present to you guys. As the EAC, you know, we're looking specifically tonight at the local waterfront revitalization program, specifically the Crescent area. Our site is located on 14 Water Street within the Crescent area. And I hope to speak to you guys about specifically the objective of revitalizing activities down Main Street from the Crescent to the river, and how our project fits in with that objective of the revitalization program. We think that it is a critical link between the Main Street district down to the train station and down to the waterfront to make this neighborhood that SPN district or that lies between these as part of that established link. Specifically, we hope to address that linkage between them by working on a live-work program, or increasing living and working both in Ossining. Our program has residential components and working components to it, and we believe that this will, our target resident in this is a missing middle, college educated, young professional that is attracted to Ossining for its good schools, its flexibility, and as we emerge out of the COVID pandemic, still tethered to Manhattan, but interested in the amenities both of Ossining and the cultural amenities of Manhattan. And as I said, our program tries to create a community at 14 Water Street by addressing both housing and office space, and we think that that meets the objective of not only the LWRP, but also the Station Plaza North District of encouraging mixed use, increasing business near the train station, and providing and encouraging that street life. So our commercial program, and this is an homage to Jaime, whose favorite band is Nirvana, if you didn't know that already, to look at small commercial spaces that have provided such a cultural or creative institutions from and foment small businesses. We think that using the ground floor as these garage studio spaces is really the highest and best use for that ground floor, and can help revitalize Ossining and attract both people that are already looking for office space in Ossining, the current population, and attract new population to Ossining. So there's precedent in the Mid-Hudson Valley for attracting this type of person to a live-work community. I'm using live-work again a little bit loosely. Our project is not specifically zoned as live-work. We imagine that there are residents that live there and that there are commercial tenants that reside there, and they may be the same, they may be different. But these are precedents of varying degrees of that relationship in the Mid-Hudson Valley. So to touch on how we arrived at our massing of our project. We start with a topography of our site that goes from Water Street up to about 18 feet. That allows us to establish a grade plane at 9 feet above Water Street. And we put 4 residential stories above that per the zoning, allowable zoning height. Underneath that sits our ground floor commercial basement. We then step the east side back 10 feet from the property line to create light and air for apartments and give some relief to the property to the east side. On the south side, we carve out a courtyard to allow light and air further into the building, and that south-facing courtyard. We push the residential core up to the north, which maximizes energy efficiency of the building, improves occupant experience. Then we take the front wall and we push it back 8 feet, 8'6", in order to break down the scale of the building, make it more pedestrian friendly, more contextual to the environment that it sits in. It gives the perception of a 4-story building while still creating the density of the 5-story building. And you know, as we talk later, it follows some of the form-based code that Ossining is looking at for those street wall presence. We then take the residential affordable housing density bonus of 1 unit in the back and put it on top as that bonus height and story to that unit, a 1-to-1 ratio, and put it on the east side of the project. And this gives a really nice tiered step to the massing of the project, breaking down the scale in the nature of the context of the neighborhood. We then add large balconies. These are about 85 square feet that you know, are family friendly or senior friendly, or you know, everybody enjoys an outdoor balcony. So we think that will really help, and it also shades the building from summer sun and creates more energy efficiency. So comparing the allowable zoning envelope that we started with on the right with our massing diagram on the left, you can see how we have carved up that volume to create our project. Addressing the floodplain, our project sits outside of the floodplain. We are cognizant that there is rising sea levels, and we know that the Ossining tomorrow is looking at those rising sea levels, and we are expecting to put our critical mechanical units on the roof of the building out of any potential floodplain or future floodplain. So if we look at the next segment here is looking at the context of the neighborhood and thinking about how our project fits into the existing uses. This is a diagram illustrating the size of residential project in the neighborhood. These range from 1 and 2 units, a few of them, to predominantly 3 and 4. There is precedent in the neighborhood to go to 5 and 7 units, and we are proposing 9 units. There is also precedent in the neighborhood for commercial spaces. This is a map showing both commercial, ground floor retail types of spaces and industrial spaces, and you can see that our project fits contextually into that. And those combine to create a number of mixed-use projects, including the future DPW site, excuse me, that we fit, that make this contextual as well. Our architectural statement here is to try and really be authentic with materials. We look at the history of this area and look at both masonry construction and cross-laminated timber and think that those can provide an industrial chic facade while at the same time creating a very warm and inviting home. And to tell you how we arrived at that, if we look around the neighborhood with architectural precedent, there's a really rich history of masonry construction here, and this is load-bearing masonry, and so it has very distinct columns. Load bricks stack on top of each other. That's how brick buildings are built, and that creates vertical readings of masonry. The other the other vernacular of our particular street that we sit on is wood porches. And these are both, these are very community driven. They're very friendly to the pedestrian and to making community, and they're built out of wood. And so when we combine those two things together, as our project intends to, we take the wooden structure of the porch and we build our framework of the building. And when we layer on masonry units in front of that, in this case, rather than them being opaque, they're translucent glass block, but translucent masonry nonetheless, that create that layered effect of having both a relationship to the vernacular of the wooden porch and to the masonry industrial nature of our site.
Interesting.
We've done this on the back of the building as well, not wanting to shirk them from the relationship between these. And this is our concept rendering of the project from a bird's eye view. The floor plans, stepping through them very quickly. The commercial ground floor, as I said, divided into small 1 to 3 desk commercial spaces with an amenity space up towards the street that provides some street presence to this. Floors 2 through 4 are, all the units are 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. They're about 925 square feet. And then on top of that, there's about an 85 square foot private balcony. On the 5th floor, you have both the 9th unit and a community garden or a community rooftop, a community being private only to the residents of the building, that will have spectacular views of the river, and we think will be very appealing. Our site plan, we can come back and jump into any level of detail that you want, but our site plan, naturally, there's a question about parking in this neighborhood. We have a 30 by 100 foot site. Simply stated, we cannot fit parking on our site. There is no reasonable way, by the time you put a core in, plus a pedestrian aisle, plus the actual parking spaces, even if you rotate them, the entire drive aisle sits outside the building. There wouldn't even be an ability to have a turnaround, so you would be, not only does it not fit, but you would be faced with cars backing across the sidewalk, which is a very dangerous proposition. And I can tell you from multiple iterations of this that not even 4 spots would fit. It just doesn't work in a 30-foot dimension. And so we're faced with, kind of a dilemma here. As I put my urban planning hat on, if the parking takes precedence, you're really looking at something with a pad in front, parking pad in front, residential on the ground floor, which is non-conforming. You're probably putting in a new, you are putting in a new curb cut. So your net may be to, drastically change the nature of the project from a high density, vibrant mixed use neighborhood to something that has parking pads in front and interrupts that street wall. Ossining itself is doing an amazing job on Main Street with creating this vibrant street wall. And we think that that type of precedent should be used down in the waterfront district as well. We see this in a lot of other towns that have vibrant street presence, and not only vibrant, but safe for pedestrians, and creates density for them. So rather than sidewalks being interrupted every 30 feet with cars backing across them, how can you create an environment where that doesn't happen. And so we look at some of the proposed form-based code that is in the visioning documents, and we see that we are already meeting those by stepping the street wall back. We can think of this project as a kit of parts that come together that break down the scale of that project, of our project, while at the same time reinforcing that public frontage. You know, frontage occupancy is part of that proposed form-based code, and we are addressing that head on by the nature of our project. You know, the final thing I'll say about parking, and we'll address parking in much greater detail with the zoning board, obviously, as we are asking for a variance here. This neighborhood is largely parking, both private and public. And I think that as we look to the future of this neighborhood, we want this to be a mixed use community, not a parking community, and how we can work on that solution together. So to summarize quickly, you know, these are objectives from the LWRP assessing, you know, what the goals of public-private action should be for revitalizing the waterfront. I think a lot of these things are appropriate to kind of grade our project against. And so, you know, priority should be given to things that enhance this area, including office and residential uses. We're meeting that objective. Action should enhance existing and anticipated uses. We fit into the context of use in this neighborhood. Improve the potential for multiple use of the site. We are mixed use. We have multiple use on this site. Serve as a catalyst for private investment in this area. I believe, and as I'm, you know, developing this project, that my own belief is this will provide a catalyst to this area. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this project. You know, I think that the rest of the neighborhood in this district will benefit from a project like this. And improve the existing economic base, and action should increase the tax base will be encouraged. I mean, this is precisely what we're trying to do, is improve both living and working in Ossining. And the new development should give consideration to the existing architectural style and character. We've spoken to that about combining the masonry with the vernacular of the wooden porch. And the next two aren't applicable, as this isn't a rehabilitation nor on the river. And so the final one should improve the deteriorated condition of a site. We are actually a vacant site. So we are, you know, the highest and best use of turning a vacant site into something that looks like this. You know, I also have Skip with me, as Jaime introduced, who is our civil engineer on the project, and has been working on some of the stormwater management, and we can speak to any technical questions that you have as well. So thank you for your time.
I think my first question is, will there be any space around the unit, around the building, for any kind of landscaping or green space at all?
We do have an interior courtyard.
Okay.
So this, if you can see, it's a little hard to see in this diagram, but this courtyard goes all the way down to the ground. And on the ground floor plan, if I can show you quickly here, this ground floor plan is, rain would fall on that ground floor. And so it provides a bit of refuge to that. But otherwise, it is a lot line to lot line ground floor.
Okay. Because when I was looking through, or taking a look at the property as it is now, it's, you know, pretty overgrown, but there is a lot of noxious weeds that have become trees. So there is a a green that we're going to be losing with putting in this building. Even though I'm very excited about this, this is a delight, and I think will be a very nice addition to that area. But we need to keep in mind what's coming out as well as what's coming in. So it looks like on your roof space, you actually have a lot of space that would be excellent for solar, and actually also doing like it's a green roof, some elements of a green roof. I'm thinking like trees and planters, just anything to kind of bring back some of the carbon, the trees and whatnot that we are losing in the lot, even though it is overgrown.
Well, we think that a large component, I'm glad you addressed that. And we think that a large component of that is teaching, getting people's hands dirty. And that's why one reason we've suggested the community garden up here as a way to, get people involved with nature, get people involved with understanding where their food comes from, growing a little planting bled themselves, doing that type of activity. We think, completes that cycle that you're talking about enhanced, putting back in what you've taken out, and not only the physical carbon, but also the education of that relationship.
Absolutely. And I love that you are putting a community garden. I think that will be a huge asset, especially to the type of resident you're looking to attract to this particular building. I'm also thinking community gardens, they can be an asset to the local flora and fauna, but not as much as say trees would be. So, we can, we may include that in our recommendation to the BAR, is that you include potted trees on the roofs as a way of giving the birds and insects that will be displaced a new place to go, on the roofs, if the rest of the committee agrees to that, obviously. I realize you guys are kind of in the early stages of planning. What kind of recycling are you going to facilities are you going to be providing to the residents to make it easy for them to recycle and do trash disposal?
Yeah, on the ground floor, there is a trash room here.
Okay.
We're obviously in the early stages here of how much space is allocated for that. But there will be a dedicated trash room. There will be dedicated recycling to that. And, and then that will be removed by the property managed group on as necessary on the schedule accordingly.
To piggyback on Leilani's question about the trash, do we know who would be picking up the trash? Would that be part of the village picking that up, or would you have to bring in a private company at this point?
Our private company
would
take it from, our company would take it like most multifamily housing projects would take it from the trash room to the street, and then the village would take it from the street to pick it up as normal.
I think that's probably a better Stuart question.
Kate, that's likely to be an issue decided by the planning board as part of the site plan approval. They may well require that it be a private carter, which is what they've sort of been leaning toward recently. But that's something that will come out in the as part of the site plan approval. And if you have a recommendation in that regard, we can certainly include that in a letter as part of the letter. Yeah. But that will be part of the site plan approval.
I will tell you this, I've experienced in Yonkers where they have a mix of sort of public and private, that the private carters come whenever they want. And they're like the worst offenders of leaving a mess. They're the worst offenders of coming at 2 o'clock in the morning and waking everybody up. And you have a lot more control over the municipal ones. So whatever your recommendation is, certainly I would at least leave them open the opportunity to analyze the right decision.
Perfect. All right.
So just kind of, I wanted to build on what Leilani was saying before. First off, great presentation. I agree. This is exciting to see something like this coming into the downtown, and I really liked how the presentation directly took, you know, some of our initiatives in the LWRP and showed how this fit into that vision. I think that you know, so all good things there. But I do, you know, I saw in the plans that you guys have to treat 25% of the new impervious. So what are the plans for that? You know, I don't know how much of the courtyard is contributing to that, or if you have, you know, other management techniques that you have in store here for the stormwater.
I'll let Skip tackle that one.
Yes, good evening. We did have a conversation with the village engineer of Kellard Sessions, as well as the village SMO, the Stormwater Management Officer, the end of March. And given that the site is greater than 2,000 square feet, but less than 2 acres, it's the discretion of the Stormwater Management Officer as to treatment and detention. And we had that discussion with him, and he's waived treatment, but he's looking into detention requirements to see what capacity he has in the street. So there will be no treatment at this site yet, as we work through the SWIP.
Okay. So we see the community garden and the outdoor area on part of the roof, but you know, I think there's another roof section, right? Because you have this bonus unit on the back end of the lot. So what's on top of that? Is that just your mechanical equipment, or what's going on up there?
Yeah, that's the mechanical equipment that will be residing on this section of the roof on the top.
And just kind of skipping around here a little bit, you know, the parcel, the property backs up to another parcel, right? It doesn't back up to C4 Road. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's about 20 feet of space between the back of our property and Secor Road.
Okay, so it's a little bit smaller. So, you know, I saw that you were planning to put in, it looked like, I would call it a retaining wall, I guess, but, you know, a wall on the back end of the grade plane. Is that going to come up and serve as a retaining wall, or are you going to be flat into the parcel behind you?
Yeah, so it will serve as a retaining wall. This wall back here, you can see that the commercial ground floor just goes back into the site. And if I flip back to the plans here, this wall at the back edge here on the eastern side, that is a retaining wall. All the underground walls, for that matter, are retaining walls that are also supporting our building.
Can I ask what kind of, have the neighbors responded to this on each side? They're gonna be losing some sunlight in their side windows, right?
So the first public meeting on this is going to be at the zoning board, which is next week. So the neighbors have not reached out to us in the planning department yet, but there's not been a public hearing on this. This is the first meeting to deal with it, but not no public
Get
hearing.
letters, or how do they find out about this?
They get notified by letter.
Okay. It's too bad. I love the tulip tree in the front. That probably is gonna have to go. But it's interesting. It's a tight squeeze.
Yeah.
It is. You know, we do think that the use of mass timber in expressing that wood structure does provide a natural feel. It's obviously not the same as a tree. I don't mean to say that it is a tree, but there is certainly a difference between it and you know, a fiber cement siding going up the front there, in terms of its natural relationship and the kind of vernacular of the neighborhood.
So can you tell me what kind of activities would go on in these studios and in the garage notion?
Yeah, this is what we call the garage studio. We imagine that these are anything from a home office that I'm sitting in right now to a small a painter might choose to rent one of these. A photography darkroom could rent one of these. A small business of 2 to 3 people might choose to rent one of these.
Okay, so these are rental, you can rent these spaces. You don't have to live in this building to use these spaces.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
We think that there will be demand from the people that live in the building to rent the spaces, but you will not be required to rent one of these spaces. Somebody that lives up on Main Street may choose to walk down and rent one of these.
That's all the questions I have for the first run.
Yeah, the only other one I think I have here is just thinking about utilities. What kind of utility restrictions are you anticipating? Are there any other upgrades that are needed outside of your lot here to service something like this coming in? I'm thinking about water supply, water supply,
Yeah,
electricity.
We do know that we have not written our load letters as we're still, in a little early here. We do know that the utilities are running down the street. Skip, I don't know if you've had any conversation further to that point about the capacity that's on the street versus what this building will need.
Don't yet have capacities, but there is water line and drainage line in the street. We do know there is a gas moratorium. So the building is programmed to be all electric at this time.
Okay, that answered my question. I was going to ask what your plan was for that. Thank you. I don't have any other questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I do have a question. Because I know Eric is not here. Another member of the board, I know she would love to know whether there would be any bike racks or any accommodation for that as part of the plans to put that in. Since there won't be any parking. And I know that's not really what we work on, but looking at the parking situation, would there be a way to accommodate the fact that there won't be parking spots for people who live there, and instead maybe put a bike rack, something that could be utilized by residents or people renting the commercial spaces?
Yeah, we have a very tight fit on the residential lobby. I wouldn't really call it a lobby. I'd call it a residential access to the elevator. We can, certainly consider what, how bike storage may be accommodated either on or adjacent with the vis-a-vis the parking relationship as well.
My main concern with the parking situation is that most of the parking down there is permit parking, and it's for the train station. And even though most people right now are still at home and that we're not utilizing the space as much, in the coming months that will change. So making sure that we have proper space available for that and to accommodate whatever environmental impacts that will have on the area, because I saw, what was it, up to 20 cars possibly that would be required. So that's 20 spots, and we just want to make sure that that is for the area when people are driving down there and looking for spots and they are competing and there is overflow from the train station, how that's going to how that'll be navigated.
Understood. And we'll be talking, we've done a parking utilization study that we'll be discussing with the zoning board. And we will be certainly, we believe that the demand of this project is less than the prescribed code due to the nature of the location that it is in, and that the demand is able to be met.
I don't have any other questions.
So where does this stand now? Have you been in front of the planning board?
No,
Dave,
as Hamid, yeah.
I apologize, Eric. Zoning board first, then it will go to planning board.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So Stuart, does the EAC need to vote on whether or not this is consistent with the LWORK tonight, or are we waiting for these other pieces?
You are welcome to do that tonight, Tom, if you want. I'm assuming, Jaime, you would know better than I that lead is going to be planning. However, we're doing this.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so the quick answer is that you're going to want to write a letter for conformance with the LWRP. Since you do have the applicant here, I would. I pulled up the coastal assessment form, which we're supposed to use to help make some determinations about the LWRP. But definitely, you don't need to vote tonight on anything. What you're going to do is write that letter and then agree amongst yourselves and send the letter. That's what traditionally is done when Erica does it.
Yeah,
So
I don't think we should vote tonight on this. I think we should just go through, as Jaime's saying, going through the checklist first, and then we can come up with the letter and we can get that done, I think, in the next week, so that we don't hold this up. But I just don't know if tonight would be the appropriate time to actually do a formal vote.
I will tell you this, to be quite honest, if you didn't even vote on it this weekend, came back next month and voted on it, they're still going to be going through their process.
Yeah.
So they have to go to zoning board. They have to get through seeker. They got to go to planning board. They're going to be at this for more than a couple.
So you're not
Okay.
under a gun here, Kate.
No, yeah.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we could, make sure we had time to get to Erica and get her review and comments. So that's good to hear.
that's absolutely fine. Sure.
If I can, I'm going to share my screen now, Eric, unless you have the form. If you want to pull up the coastal assessment form. Can't hear you, Eric. You're on mute.
Sorry. I think you have it at your fingertips faster than I do. So I'll let you share.
Okay. Great.
Eric, can I just ask a question? Is it possible to share the PowerPoint at some point? Because I suspect that the missing members from the EAC might actually like to see it.
I will defer to precedent there, and if that's typical and confidential.
You are under an obligation, Eric, to
yes, there you go.
Disseminate it so that we can post it. Yeah, you're
There's your
obligated.
answer. Thank you, Mr. Planning Director.
All right, so here's the coastal assessment form. If there are any specific questions, as you can see, it's pretty much no on everything. Here's the thing. I know that there was a question about the specifics of the coverage, and so the one thing is it does need some variances, but it does not need any variances as it relates to the coverage. There are some site planning questions I think about, which are not really related to LWRP, but there are some site planning questions in relation to the engineering of those retaining walls, and those matters are going to be dealt with by the planning board.
Yeah.
But it's not the type of thing that would make it inconsistent with the LWRP. So with that in mind, are there any specific questions you wanted to follow as it relates to the coastal assessment form?
No, I didn't have any.
Not at this time.
Will this get a chance to go back before us after it's been through the paces?
If you think it's necessary, Leilani, you know, the hope was to at least bring it before you at this point. If you have any questions, obviously, you know, the applicant will be available to answer them. We try to minimize as many appearances as they have to make, even if they have to do it remotely. But if there is something that you folks need, as Jaime said, they still have to go through zoning. They still have to go back to planning. Those will be a number of meetings to go. So if there are issues that come up, you folks can certainly do it. This meeting will be available for all members to both view, and there's a transcript if you want to read it, although sometimes the Zoom transcripts are interesting. I read one recently about our comprehensive plan that had many naughty words in it, I should not simply say, and I do not think Frank Fish talks that way, but we won't go into that. But if you think it's necessary, but Leilani, that can certainly be arranged, which is why it's absolutely not necessary for any vote or anything like that. I think you know, you should look at it. You'll get the PowerPoint. You know, look at everything, so you can make a proper you know, recommendation onto the planning board, which is at the point where your recommendation is necessary.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, the thing to consider, and it's not just about this particular applicant, but all applicants in general. There's a reason why we do try to minimize the amount of times applicants come back to these board meetings. It's not just because we're worried about their time, but it also costs money to pay, you know, Skip Francis, consultants, and things like that to show up to these meetings. And so we don't want to, you know, needlessly bring people back. So I would say that if you have a couple of questions, we can always email them to the applicant. They can get back. If you have a really like a tremendous amount of questions where it requires them to come back, then I would say then, you know, then that's necessary. But in general, you know, we do shoot for kind of a one-time at the EAP.
Understood.
You know, obviously, big projects, I would anticipate bigger projects are going to be much different, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to be treated as such. But
I do have one quick question, if I may, to ask Jaime or the board. Isn't it true that you want to conclude the EAC's review prior to the planning board's decision, because the planning board considers comments or suggestions? Yes. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. However, so let me, so I'll go over this with you, Skip. I did go over this with Erica. I'm going to move you over so I'm not staring off to the side here. I got the two screens, so you know that as a Zoom, you're talking to somebody over here. So here's the thing. You have a few steps that you have to go through. EAC is a review board. They provide a recommendation on the LWRP matters and any other items that they want to talk about this project to the planning board, right? That would get incorporated to any sort of conditions from the planning board. But in order for the planning board to act, two things have to happen. First thing is that the seeker needs to be done, and the zoning board needs to be done. So the zoning board is going to meet next, and they're going to take it. They're going to open up the seeker process. Most likely, they're going to take over the seeker process. That's what we're guessing. And then they're going to have to close the hearing, reconvene, because they have to wait a certain amount of time after declaring their intent to be lead agency. And then hopefully at the next meeting, if timing works out, then they'll be able to make a decision, theoretically. At that point, after that second ZBA meeting, the planning board will be in a position, technically speaking, to make a decision. Whether they've, you know, gotten all the information they need is another question. But the planning board cannot make a decision at its earliest until, you know, what is that, like the later half, second half of May, right? I don't know that it's going to go that quickly, and I certainly, you know, have told Eric it may not go that quickly, but they absolutely couldn't do anything until that point. So that gives the EAC the time necessary to make their decision. Usually it takes a couple of weeks to get these letters out, but even if they decided they just wanted to wait because Erica's out of town, and that's the board chair, then, you know, you're gonna get something from the EAC well in advance of that. So it will not affect the timeline.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I don't have any questions at this point. As Jaime so wonderfully put it before, if we have questions, we'll email them and we'll get a letter as soon as possible out to you. And we'll definitely make sure we hit you guys before you're before the planning board.
Wonderful.
Thank you guys very much. It's a pleasure speaking with you all, and I will package that the PowerPoint up for Jaime for distribution as necessary, and look forward to hearing from you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.
This sort of serves as a draft of which you'll get to look at when we start doing the DPW site. Because now that will obviously, where we talk there that you hear maybe we want a person to come back just once, that's obviously a far more, as you know, as all of you have seen.
Yes,
That's what I had in mind when I said that.
Had more involved.
That's why I said, they may need to come back at DPW.
What's the timeline on the DPW? What's next for that?
Next, the first thing is going to happen is there'll probably be some internal staff meetings with the Wilder Bolter stuff. There is nothing pending currently before any land use board.
Yeah, we have an internal meeting next week with them to go over the timeline. A lot of it depends on when they submit the materials necessary to move forward, getting onto a planning board, which will kind of kick off the process. And that application is pretty involved. So I'm not sure what their timeline is going to look like. I know they've done quite a bit of site engineering work, but they really need to sort of flesh out, designs of the, the walkway and all sorts of other things. So that's going to be much more involved. And
Does the Board of Trustees do any voting on that? Or
yeah.
Is that coming up?
Yes, it will come to you after it goes to the planning board. It'll be referred to the Board of Trustees for special permit. And the special permit, the special permit has to be granted first, correct, Stuart, before the...
Special permit should go before the planning board grants its site plan, yes.
Yeah, so it would start at the planning board. It would get referred out to the EAC. It would get referred out to the Board of Trustees. The EAC would provide their commentary. The Board of Trustees would have to grant the special permit. And then after the special permit was granted, then the planning board could grant the site plan approval. And the density bonus, I think the density is...
That's why they want that's why they need the special waterfront for the...
Okay, so the density bonus...
Closer to the end of the year, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take at least a couple of months.
Yeah. Okay.
Dana, just 30 minutes in, out, really,
No biggie. No biggie.
Yeah.
I've only been working on it for the entire year that I've been here. So.
But at some point, obviously, that folks will come to you and, far more detailed documents. I do know that there is that the developer is having a meeting with Con Ed, I think later this week to, work that. As he said, basically, it's moving slowly, but it's moving. So that's, the important stuff, because obviously, getting that into the brownfield program is, very, very important. So
Yeah.
Does it look like it's going to happen? Is that?
I think that's the expectation. Yeah.
That's great.
Which is, that's sort of a dance between Con Ed, the developer, the DEC, and us, to the extent that it's still our property. So, it all, and making sure that, what needs to get done can get done. But I think, that should happen too. So we're working there.
Great.
Just going back to the 14 Water Street real fast. So one of the suggestions that I'm hoping we can get put in the letter, and this will help address like the rainwater and stormwater issue, is putting potted trees on top of that roof to actually help absorb some of that rainwater. I don't know if that's something we can recommend to the different boards or not, but
I think you can recommend it. I think that I don't know specific. I know for a fact that there's different engineering loads for different types of uses.
right.
So, a green roof requires a really high engineering load, and then just the patio roof requires a different engineering load. And I don't know how many trees, at what point does that change things?
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
So
if
if you
they're
recommend
gonna-
anything you want to recommend, right?
Yeah.
Recommend anything you want, and then the developer will come back and say, yeah, that's doable or it's not doable. But they're already
Right.
planning to put, a community garden, so I'm assuming they could put some kind of vegetation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking specifically at that mechanical roof because it will be engineered enough to support the mechanical equipment they're going to be putting up there. So to me,
I don't actually know. I literally don't know anything about
yeah.
how much
And
any
the,
of these things weigh.
Yeah. And
So-
whatchamacallit? Okay, the colored session. That was one of the line items that they put in there was that the trees have to be evaluated. They have to protect some of the trees. So, we've like the tulip tree that DNS mentioned and a couple of others, we can make recommendations about that too. So,
Hey,
can't
Lonnie,
just-
I was gonna say I support the recommendation. I think we should focus on the aspect of replacing the loss of trees and that type of insect habitat, because I think
Yeah.
that potted trees on the community roof really would help with that. Whereas if we go with the stormwater retention, they're just gonna point at how little impact the potted trees are gonna have.
okay.
So I agree with the recommendation. It's just that how we frame it may help. And I do think that the loss of, the pervious soil there is a little bit of an issue. You're not only are you coming in with a roof and all the rainwater that's hitting that, but everything that's coming off the lot behind it is going to have to go around their new structure and into the neighbors. And it's not even just the surface because it's almost like a basement that they're putting in. As
Yeah.
the base of the building. So, I don't know what the recommendation is.
I think that's a really good point, but I do want to note that, the village has almost no spaces where they allow this level of coverage. It's the Station Plaza North District is one of them. The other one I think is the VC District, right? And other than that, there's almost nowhere that you can do this kind of thing. And I think the reason behind allowing this level of development on a site when they rezoned this district is because they wanted that dense stuff right around the train station. So they don't if you go to any of the other districts, like the T-zone, the S75 district, it's like 40% max. It's lower in certain areas. The CDD requires, no more than 30%. So that level of coverage that they're providing, that they're showing on the site, it's code compliant. But I think the code was crafted in such a way that only in this section below, Seeker and Main, very small area, they allowed that density. And so while I think, I think the point about losing green space on that site is important. I think that when they developed that plan, it was developed in partnership with sort of like the CDD zoning where they wanted to keep as much green space as possible.
Right.
Right. So they wanted to focus development. And just from a broader perspective, transit-oriented development is the most sustainable type of development you can do. Assume, say for instance, instead of putting 8 units here, you took a whole long block and you built out 8 single-family homes that were 1 story. Each one of those stories has coverage, right? So that one 2,500 square foot apartment sits on top of, a bunch of others, right?
Right.
You take that same apartment and you give it its own separate plot with its own separate driveway and its own separate sidewalks, its own separate, street connecting it, its own separate pipes connecting it. There's just a lot more environmental damage done by those 8 houses next to each other than 8 houses stacked on top of each other. And so I think that there's I understand the idea behind saving green space is super important. There are trade-offs, right? And so the
Absolutely.
trade-offs,
Yeah,
the trade-off in density is that you're sort of doing it in the most sustainable way.
Right, exactly. And that's what I think our job is to say, okay, this is a great building and it's going in the right place. Let's see what we can do to make it, just a little bit more environmentally feasible, while still getting the businesses and getting the correct kind of development. The stormwater is something we have to look at because this is literally right next to the Hudson, which is our primary reason d'etre. So, we have to think about how can we do within the code and within the zone to maximize water, preventing water running off the buildings, running into the neighborhood, running down, across. I mean, we have to consider how to manage that the best. So I think that's
exactly what I was trying to get at. I think that this, from an environmental standpoint, is, like you said, it's much better than what they showed in Seattle, where you have, a driveway and one unit next to the next. So my point of bringing up the stormwater wasn't to suggest that we need to save some of that green space. It's just, literally, how do we deal with the water, because it's got to go somewhere, and if they don't have a plan in place to address it, it's just going to get pushed around them to their neighbors, and the neighbors are going to have to deal with it until a developer comes in and puts in their own complex next door, and it gets pushed down. And right now the plan, sounds like, is all the water, it's not getting treated, so it's all going to go into the stormwater system, which is fine, but now you're also like, the infrastructure has to be there for that. I'm not, it may be, I don't know.
No, I think it's a good comment. I think what you're saying is you're in part, you're concerned that water that was coming down the hill is now sort of just going to get diverted out. So maybe one of your comments can be sort of, expressing concern about sort of making sure that the site engineering understands the displacement of water onto neighbors, the problem of displacement of water onto neighbors, and just making sure that any site engineering accounts for that to keep stormwater capturing on site.
Yeah.
And Courtyard is good. I'm sure they're going to be on top of it with their review. It's just,
it's always good to throw in the comments. I think the comments are helpful. They get read. They do get read. So
yeah, I'm wondering if, when they're designing, the space around, if they could create some kind of like directional system that actually funnels the water that's sheeting off of everywhere, into that courtyard space they have, to kind of create like a natural water catch. And they could, there's no reason they can't, maybe dig down into the ground a little bit, put some rocks to help filter the water, and then sod on top of it to basically create like a water catch, a natural water catch system that wouldn't be that expensive.
The courtyard is only for the residential units.
Right.
So underneath the courtyard is the commercial space. So I know that much I know, right?
Yeah.
So
okay, never mind.
There's a building down there. But I think that all of these are good points, and the project is still ongoing, right? So
yeah, that's why I'm suggesting some of these like high, grandiose things, because they're at the very beginning of planning. So mentioning them now, little seeds.
Maybe recommend trying to incorporate rain barrels for the community garden. So instead of routing the water to the courtyard, you route it to a central, barrel. Essentially, they could make it much more aesthetically pleasing, but then the water's there and they can use it in their gardening, which is all, the garden set up there. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. It could also be used in all of the balcony. There's a lot they could do. So anyways, those are my suggestions. I'll try and remember them when we're circulating the letter.
I'm writing some stuff down from what everybody's recommending, and I will do my best to remember any stuff, and I'll make a quick draft of what we were talking about tonight and send it out this weekend, so we can always add anything that we might think of, anything I may have forgotten, just throw it in there.
And if you just do keywords like Leilani potted plants, something like that, I'll be like, oh yeah.
We can also circulate the transcript.
Oh yeah.
That, you're not alone, Kate.
And since none of us are using naughty words, it's okay.
It was an interesting thing to read. I said, I didn't remember Frank saying that about the comprehensive plan, particularly since he was involved in drafting it. But okay.
And I've sat in on almost every one of those comprehensive plan meetings, and I don't ever remember hearing a naughty word.
Well, it's funny. Before Google, the big thing you used to have in your car would be Hagstrom maps. And those are the ones you couldn't fold back. And if you looked at them carefully, they would have names of streets that did not exist, but they also were very naughty named streets. That was for their copyright purposes, because if someone would copy it, they would suddenly say, I don't live on that street. And so but it was kind of funny because that's not just, it happens to be, that's what.
Things that lawyers know, you know what I mean? I love this.
Yes, things we pick up, but I was going to say to Frank, I don't remember you saying that, but maybe you were just upset at some point. But it's the transcripts here will be helpful because it sort of brings back what it all says and has your name, so it's good.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments about this site, or questions or concerns?
are
so
they-
I'm gonna move on. Oh,
Sorry. Do they have any requirements as far as like the low income housing?
Yes, there'll be one
One
unit.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they have a challenge ahead of them because right now the way that the affordable housing ordinance is written, sort of weird. It allows for like a density bonus, but because of this whole coverage thing, the fact that it's like totally built up on one site, they sort of maxed out what you can build. So they have to get a variance to go up because that's where they want to they want to make space for the extra affordable housing units. So they need to get that variance. They may get it. They may not. I don't know. But things could still change on that roof, right? They could end up not getting the variance, and then they'll have a full roof, right? And then that full roof will, potentially change what's going on up there. So
That sucks.
we don't know what's going to happen yet with the final form of the building until the zoning board makes their decision. And I couldn't tell you what they're thinking because I haven't spoken with anybody about it yet.
But since their proposal calls for more than 6 units, there would be one affordable.
Yeah.
You think they're going to get the parking variance past the zoning board?
I would.
'Cause that's a big concern.
I'll say this. I don't know I haven't spoken to the zoning board or any member of them at all. But that district they have a parking study, and we have a parking study, in fact, that backs it up, that shows that there's like 700 spaces within walking distance of that parcel. Now, a lot of those were previously being used as commuter spaces, but there are like 700 parking spaces in the district. So it's not like there aren't a lot of spaces for cars to go. The other part of it is that the zoning is written in such a way that you are sort of obligated to have commercial activity on the bottom floor and residential above it. You have to do that. That's part of the zoning. They would need to get a variance to not do that. And even though it's written like that, every single parcel down there is the same. It's the same little skinny lot. So because of the way that they're designed, there's almost no possibility for anybody to provide parking according to code in that district. So, I mean, they have some really unique challenges that are unique to that parcel as it relates to parking. And there's a tremendous supply of parking in the neighborhood. It's not free parking necessarily, but there is a lot of parking in the neighborhood. So I think that their approach is going to be
also a wait list. There's also a wait list for a lot of that parking.
Well, I don't know how that wait list. I don't know enough about it. They know more about it, but there used to be a long wait list, but now nobody's.
I don't know what it is
way
now.
way
and I don't
way
know
down
how-
because of COVID.
Yeah, and I don't know how that's going to go in the next few months, but I mean, people are going to start going back to the office and looking at maybe not the way they did before, but those parking spaces will get used. A lot of the parking, the overflow parking, goes on to Central Avenue and it goes down Water Street, so some of those spots really aren't available in that sense. So it's like, it's kind of confusing, or it could be, I don't know, but
Yeah,
I guess
I mean,
things that'll be brought up at the zoning board and planning.
They're going to have to go to the zoning board and they're going to have to make their case. And so I can't handicap what the zoning board is going to say. But I will say this personally, that I don't know from a policy standpoint that it's always a great idea to put the concerns of people who live in another neighborhood over the people who live in that neighborhood. And so there's almost none of those houses down there have parking on site. And so if it gets down to a decision about are the needs of commuters who come and park during the day more important than the needs of the people who would live on that block, at night, they could take, you know what I mean? Like, then that's a decision. And so I'm not trying to, I think it's going to be a decision the zoning board's going to have to make.
Yeah.
But there's
and
a
that's
real,
not really that's not our decision. I get that. So like it's more of just that at night it won't be the concern. It's just during the day when everyone is there, you know, and people who are paying for parking are there. That can be a concern. But it's more from the environmental side of it, and what that could potentially do is really more of where the concern is, I think, on our end and what we would want to bring up. But I mean, they'll just have to go in front of the zoning board to do it. You know, it's just gonna take time. Yeah.
Can I ask a really obvious question? What are the barriers to turning that commuter lot into a parking garage?
money.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, but all right.
I mean,
so
if it was a commuter lodge, it would be, I think, a better use of the space. It's just, it has to be made. And
I know. It's.
Yeah. So I mean, this is an interesting topic, and I think that I'd love to sit here and talk about it. In fact, I'm willing to talk about it as long as people want. But I know that I don't know if every single board member wants to stay here for this conversation. But like, the comprehensive plan. Well, the comprehensive plan does talk about trying to sort of pull away from building on the west side of the train tracks. And so part of the plan of building, pulling away from the west side of the train tracks and building into some of this like long-term resiliency is envisioning, potentially building a garage on the east side of the tracks. Part of the discussion with the DPW garage is about adding an additional level of parking over there that would help sort of create more volume on the east side of the tracks. That volume could be used by people who need it right now. Some of the people who live in that neighborhood on the east side of the tracks. And so there's I think that there's a desire so far, theoretically, to move over. Obviously, the comprehensive plan has not been finished, and so we have a trustee here who can speak probably more to that part of the process and where we're going, but it's in the comprehensive plan to try to draw some of that stuff away and bring it over. And it is connected to so the garage is something I think that would be, tremendously supportive towards the development of the east side of the tracks. But, how development looks in that district, is a factor of either what's permitted now or, what's permitted in the future. If the zoning changes to allow something that's more or less dense.
I may, since I have not been involved in the parking to that extent, thank goodness. I have other things like dangerous dogs and feral cats and God knows what else. Was there ever any consideration given to making the train station parking sort of like a day-night type thing, which is essentially that between the hours of, let's say, 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., it's more public, and between, only because, first of all, there are lots. So it's, except for it's a certain amount that are Metro North, they're ours. They're empty on weekends, and which I know anyone can park there. But I'm just because I get a lot of calls from people, and I apologize for diverting here, but I get a lot of calls from people who live down there who literally say, I have no place to park. I have to either walk all the way up the hill, or I have to park illegally, knowing I'm going to get a ticket. So I'm just wondering, is there any possibility that, at 8 o'clock at night, for example, or 7 o'clock at night, we allow parking at that location, and we do it as a permit, and but they have to be out by 6 a.m., something like that. Or we do a certain, I don't know if that was.
Yeah, so I think so I'm going to try to answer this as best I can. So there's a strategy document that's coming out that's going to be dealing with some of the parking. A lot of the focus is on the downtown and not really around the waterfront. I do think that there's going to be some discussion about the waterfront. This applicant, 14 Water Street, is going to talk a little bit about sort of the availability of parking. And I think that their plan is to discuss purchasing commuter spaces. So like get on the list, purchasing commuter spaces, paying, market rate for those spaces so that they can make sure that their tenants have, theoretically a spot that they can use. And so in as much as you can park during the day, with a commuter space and you could park at night for free, it would cover them. But I think that the question about whether or not a special permit was created is something that certainly we have discussed internally. There are challenges, I think, with like the LPR system, which is the license plate reader system. There's a lot of other questions that are probably better asked to the people who know how they work.
No, sure.
Because I'm kind of on the edge of the parking discussion. I've been involved, but I'm not leading that discussion. So I hope that we can get somewhere that we can figure that out. But I do think that like it'll be very hard to redevelop anything down in that Station Plaza district without sort of recognizing the inherent challenges of building parking on any of those parcels. And so if you say, okay, well, we want to redevelop it somehow, even according to code, not like building some massive thing, but just saying like, we just want a straight code, perfectly, we're going to follow the code except for the parking, then I think that we need to figure out a system to help, deal with the lack of parking ability on site for the small parcels. And primarily, I think we're only talking about that little sort of teardrop between Main Street and Secor, because everything else is kind of doing its own thing. They do have some ability to provide parking. But that teardrop, there's almost nothing that can be done over there for any of those sites, unless you say, we don't care what our zoning code says, we just want single family homes there. And that can't be look, it's up to people higher than me, but I don't think that was the intent, to turn our TOD district into a single family home district.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what people want. That's certainly not what the zoning code permits.
Yeah.
Does that answer? I mean, that was a really long meandering answer, Stuart. I apologize.
I thought it was perfectly fine. I like the idea of the community gardens because now that you'll be able to grow your own pot, that'll be an absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
Share out at the Hudson.
That's right. That's right.
I bought
The
only thing I might recommend for the community garden for them is that, I don't know if they're assuming all of the plots will be used, but maybe have a backup just in case it isn't. So it's not just lying there as these unused garden beds.
Yep.
So, maybe I'll maybe make a recommendation of like coming up with a backup plan so that we know that they're getting utilized and that we are actually using it as this nice green space as part of the building, and not you putting it there in the hopes that the residents will do it, because sometimes people find out later on that gardening is a lot more work than they thought it was.
Right.
I got an unused garden in my backyard. It's been sitting there for years.
Yeah. Maybe we should provide them with our native plants guide.
Yeah, that's
I
actually
like
a good
that.
point. I think that's a good point. I agree with the whole idea of a vegetative roof over a community garden in general.
Yeah.
I think you're 100% right. Who's gonna?
They're kind of like, they're assuming like, people who are going to have time to do that and want to continue doing it. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot.
They're marketing to young urban hipsters that are running their own business that also
they're gonna use it
garden.
one season and never again.
Disconnect between the community garden and the people they're marketing to.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
They'll use it once and that'll be it. They're like, oh, this is more than I want.
That may actually be a part of their plan, which ultimately would be changed, because it may be that, from the planning board and from you folks, it may be, there may be something better than a community garden, which can answer a lot of the questions you folks have, rather than depend on, people who live in the building to basically go up, the 4 flights and, do this. And as someone who has a 30 by 50 garden in the backyard, because my wife loves to garden. So, and she bought more. I will just say this, when the pandemic first started, people are going into Home Depot, they're buying toilet paper, they're buying paper, all the stuff. What am I walking out with?
Tomato plants.
Plant beds. People are going, what are you doing? I said, you never know. And but the
zombie
point
apocalypse,
is,
man,
it may well
That's
be.
what I did.
May well be that at the end of the day, the gardens are not there, and maybe what you do is some of the the green that you're suggesting there might actually be another suggestion, because again, it's early in the stage. That's the kind of plan that can be dealt with as they go on and do what they have to do. But it's an interesting mix for a really tiny postage stamp lot is the best way to describe it. So it's interesting down there.
You know, and I do want to set the record straight on one thing they said that was incorrect. Nirvana is not my favorite band. Okay, I'm more of a Sublime, Clash kind of a guy. You know, I like Nirvana. I'm very fond of Nirvana, but they are not my favorite band.
I'm very glad that's on the
I'm
record.
happy to hear that.
Yeah, I just, you know,
I want you to sign the transcript for me when it says that, okay?
It's important that we straighten that out.
they're a little too emo. You know what I mean? Kurt Cobain's a little too emo for me. You know, I like Sublime. They're a little more peppy.
Anything else on the agenda?
Clash is peppy.
Yes, we have continuing business of the board, the open space inventory. So that got a little delayed, but I've been able to pick up on that. I have a meeting with Jaime next week. I will confirm for Monday, 10:30. I did get your email. So I sat in on an open space inventory that the Department of Environmental Conservation held last month. And they used examples from Blooming Grove and Kingston on how to put together, or what they did for an open space inventory. So I'm taking the map that Jaime helped me make a while back, and I'm going to add a natural resources inventory in with it. So over the weekend, I should be getting out to you guys a kind of preliminary map, so you guys can all look over what we have on it and get any feedback that might be there. So there will be things like, what am I getting? There's habitats and wildlife, water resources, some land use stuff will be in there as well, also that we can see like what kind of open spaces we have, and then compile that with the tier group that Leilani had proposed a while back, so that we can create an actual inventory and have that ready for, I guess, whoever would need it, whether it be for the comp plan or just for general use throughout the village. So it will include stuff that this county recognizes as open space, as well as some of the stuff that we've flagged as public and private open space, and have that actually visualized for everybody. I don't know if there was anything in particular anyone wanted included in with it as well. So if there's nothing that anybody wants to recommend, I can just send you the preliminary maps and we can just go from there.
I think that's good, yeah.
So what qualifies, I wasn't able to come to a couple of meetings, but what qualifies as open space? It's parks,
That depends. If it's open space is one of those things that we can kind of define it either as just undeveloped land, or we can define it as land that's partially developed under a certain percentage. So some of what might be designated as like open space based on the amount of space that hasn't been developed on a plot, we might not necessarily want to look at it as open space, but it could be something that's added to show that we have greenery throughout the village. Open space could really just be, it could be just undeveloped land in some cases, forest area, it could be parks. Some places have utilized, say that again, what?
parking lots, or is it just green space?
They try to keep it as undeveloped green space or stuff that hasn't been disturbed. But some of the green space does have parking lots in it. Public schools are actually part of some of the green space inventories I've seen around Westchester. So I've been kind of pulling from the different municipalities to see how they've done it. And it's such a wide range of definitions. Some places have made it as like, it's got to be state park-like land and it has to be completely open, a forested area, and other places have said as long as it's less than 25% of your lot is developed, then we'll count it as open space. So it really is up to a local municipality of how they want to define it. So that's part of what will be within the map, and people can decide, do we agree on the definition? I have to add you, Dana, to, I had a Google file going a while back that had like a quick like draft of a proposal of what we were working on. So I will add you to that so you can see kind of like how we were defining open space back when we started the project, and if there's anything that you might want to add to that, would be great.
Sure.
And then other than that, we have approval of minutes and resolutions from February. I don't think I got the minutes for February, so I mean, I'd be happy to sign them once I get them. But I did not see them in my email.
I will, I'll reach out to Jamie. I'll check in with Jamie tomorrow.
And I think that is it.
Cool.
Are we having, I know this is not on the agenda, are we having a village fair this year? What's going on with summertime festivities? And I know Earth Day, that's turned into a week-long thing that's being done in collaboration with other businesses around Ossining. So it's not the traditional Earth Day festivities that we usually have, but like, are there any plans for June or anything after that? Or are we still in a?
I have no idea.
You're kind of
I apologize. Maybe Trustee White?
No, we haven't. I would doubt there's going to be a village fair. I just don't see how you could do that. It's weird because June is going to be this cusp, right, where you can't really commit to something that big. What I will see happening is people moving their events to later in the year when the COVID situation is even lower, hopefully. So like the St. Anne's Fair, maybe we'll move to August or something, or maybe they can do it then, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough call, but I would think probably not. I would think probably not the way we've had it. I don't think so. Too many people close. You know, it's hard to regulate mask wearing. You know, I'm personally, I don't see it, but we haven't, I don't know. Karen would know if she's gotten any, if the chamber has talked to her about that, but I haven't heard anything. Don't know.
Okay. Well, good to know. Sad, but you know, it's for the best at this point.
I think so.
All right. It was always next year.
Oh, a year after that.
Yeah.
No, I think we're going to see a lot of events moving to later, but I don't know if the fair will be one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any other?
No, I just, one last note, you know, I know that when I started on this board, one of the questions that had come up had been like, hey, we want to get more involved. We want to see more projects. I do think that we're starting to see a little bit more interest in projects that are coming this way, and a lot of what I've heard coming down the pike is coming to the to the west side of the area, and some of the bigger stuff that's not type 1 but is type 1 or unlisted, things are coming to you. So I think expect that you're going to be getting brought into a lot more stuff. So I know you pushed really hard for that last year, and I think y'all were like, we need more, and I said, just just wait, give it a try. So you're starting to see it. So I think that's a good thing.
If that's the case, then is it possible that we could put out another call for volunteers then? Because I know we are still short a member, and
who appoints?
That might be helpful, or
who appoints? Is it a mayoral appointment, or is it a?
Yeah, we're in the process now of interviewing candidates for positions. So there are people who have asked to be interviewed for the environmental advisory commission. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask is, do you ever have junior members? I know the town did at one point, where they had like high schoolers, and I know a couple of young people who are working on environmental projects locally with like nonprofits and stuff. They're amazing young people. One of them, Sade Takuru, do you know Sade? Was on the town planning board as like a high school junior member. And then I think it's her boyfriend, Javier. They are amazing young people, and they're doing a lot of great stuff and with other young people. And so, I mean, if there's an opportunity, if you're interested in that, certainly pursue it.
I think that would be amazing. I mean, this is their town or their village, and they should have a voice. Absolutely. I think that would be
If
an
they want to
excellent
get
thing.
involved and they want to get
Yeah.
involved, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. well,
And this is, I think, a great training opportunity too, for them to get some hands-on experience with this. So that would be, I think that would be great.
And they will
I'm
bring.
trying to get more young people involved in the commissions that I'm a liaison to. Because you're kind of grooming people to, be on the, but I just think it's great experience for them,
And they have a perspective that we as adults just miss.
No, yeah, they do. They really do.
So, yeah, absolutely. Bring them in.
Okay.
Cool.
Dramatic gesture.
I'll talk.
Dramatic. Is that what that was?
Second.
Mayoral appointments. I know that our application period is closed. We can reopen it though if we need to. So I'll just look into that, I guess.
Well, then let's wait for the first interview round
Yeah.
to go through, and then we can, that's great news.
I know that we're going to be asking the chairs of the commissions to sit in on the interviews if possible. So that would be Erica, I guess. Or if not Erica, then maybe UK or, I think it's
I'm
important
around.
for the people on the boards now to talk to the people who want to be on the boards. I think it's important. So it's just weird. I remember on the HPC, they fired everybody, then they replaced them. Then people just would show up out of nowhere. Hi, I'm on the board now. And you're like, hi, who are you? It was strange. Yeah, it was weird. It'd be great if the transitions could be a little more gentle.
That doesn't sound gentle at all.
All right.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, I guess this, I close the meeting.
Gavel us out.
Bye.
Yeah, I'm
All
over
right,
here.
so have a good one,
That was
everybody.
good.
That's
Have a good night, everyone.